Veritas Aquitus by Bones Boy 15, Chapter 10, Best Day Ever. Where to begin? Glinda Good Witch looked over the three teams seated before her as she paced the front of her personal classroom. Her hands were folded behind her back, and a scowl was set on her face as she looked at the whiskered blonde male seated with his team in the center front desk. Where to begin? Shall I start with the inconceivable reason of performing hooky? In my defense, getting a girlfriend wasn't the reason I decided to skip. Natter rubbed his neck sheepishly. He cowed significantly, nearly falling under the desk as Goodwitch's infuriated eyes fell on him. Naruto swallowed audibly and hung his head. I'll be quiet now. Quite, Goodwitch huffed as she walked over to Team Nox's left to stand between Team Ruby. Perhaps I should ask instead why you, Miss Rose, allowed your teammate to slip away and perform the same act, sneaking into another team's room, an all-male team's room I am. What I mean to say is, Yang bribed me with cookies. That's a dirty lie. Quite. Goodwitch need to not raise her voice to stop the two sisters, but seated on opposite sides of their desk, with the older further away from her newfound boyfriend, and resisted the urge to smirk when Ruby and Yang let out a meek squeak, and squeaks and sat up straight, with her scowl still in place. Goodwitch went over to the other side of the room where Team Coffee was seated, all as nervous as the rookies. Or perhaps I should start with asking why in the world a second-year team, one who is notably remarked as possibly the best of their year, decided to sit back and watch with notable hostages as their team leader unloaded, which looked down at her scroll and then glared at Coco, who shrunk into her seat. 800 fire dust infused rounds into the dormitory. I was preventing my cute juniors from making a terrible mistake. Coco laughed nervously. Nearly killing both in the process? Goodwitch inquired with a glare. Well, that's one way to stop unprotected sex, right? Coco! We weren't even that far yet. Mr. Uzumaki, Miss Xiaolong, be quiet. Both blondes shrunk down as the professor and second head of the school glared at them. Now, Goodwitch began again as she walked to the front of the classroom and then turned to face the three. If it were up to me, I'd have all of you expelled and shipped back to wherever any of you had decided to call home prior to arrival to Beacon. However, for some unknown reason, Professor Osman has decided against taking this action. The three teams sighed in visible relief, and Goodwitch almost smirked again. Almost. Instead, he's decided to have the failed visitation rights of all three teams pulled for the next 3 months and starting immediately. Was it wrong that Goodwitch took pleasure in seeing the horror on each of their faces? Probably not. They did just cause at least 200,000 lien of damage to a campus dorm, and he decided that at least Team Nox's dorm room is being restored, that each team will be assigned a personal teacher to oversee and watch them for those next 3 months. The teams will not be allowed to train, group study, or engage in any recreation without the express permission of their respective handler. Okay, now it was wrong that she took pleasure from their horrified faces. Goodwitch decided that now was the appropriate time to smirk as she looked down at her scroll. A button was pressed and she smiled as her classroom door slid open. And 4 adults walked in. The only 3 faces lit up as they did. Goodwitch saw this and her scowl fell. Yosh! A man with black hair styled like a bowl and enormous eyebrows cried out with a pumped fist. He was dressed in a skin-tight green suit that had various pads of a contrasting maroon over his body. His feet had mutted orange boots on of a contrasting maroon over his body. His feet had dark mutted orange boots on, styled similarly to the boys of Team Nox. He gave a thumbs up towards the 3 teams and beamed, which caused his teeth to gleam. Greetings, youthful hunters. We are Team Cage, the last youthful and spring-filled team from Vacuo, brought here by the youthful and wise Professor Ospen. Oh, for the love of... Guy, we talked about this, a man beside him said with a heavy sigh. He wore wrapped around sunglasses, much like Kurma, and was dressed in a heavy blue outfit with a black trench coat over it. His brown hair was spiked up and fell slightly towards the left. This is so embarrassing. A woman with long black hair groaned into her bandaged right hand. She wore a dress that looked like it was made of wrappings and was sleeveless over her left arm, while a red sleeve hung down from her right. Red eyes opened as she glared at the loud youth preacher. He heeled variations of the sandals worn by most of the team knocks covered her feet. Easy, Kurenai. Guy's been being Guy. Just being Guy. The tall, bearded man to her left consoled her with a laid back smile on his face. His hair was a similar black as the other man, Guy's, but was short and slightly spiked like the third man. He had a rugged appearance and gave a light wave to the group of teens. The rugged man wore a sleeveless black vest and had an unlit cigarette hanging from his mouth. Around his waist was a sash with a small red monkey on it. Like the rest of his male teammates, he wore combat sandals on his feet. Sup, kids? Wait a minute. Is that? The woman Kurnai gave him a sharp elbow in the side before she looked at Goodwitch with a smile. So, where do you want us? Goodwitch could see that a certain three students recognized each and every of the team members that Osplin requested as their handler. She wanted to rant and rage how it was unfair that she had to be miserable while those that caused it, mostly anyways, were reunited with old friends. Her friend and boss was such a sneaky bastard sometimes. Well, Osmond suggested we needed a responsible woman to rein in two very irresponsible siblings and their equally rambunctious partners, Goodwitch said as she adjusted her glasses. She looked over at Team Ruby, who had angelic smiles plastered on their faces, and then back at Kurenai. Don't let them trick you. They're Hellions, all of them. Team Knox snickered or smirked, while each girl hung their heads in shame. All right then, Kurenai smiled as she walked over to stand by the team. She waited patiently while Goodwitch moved down the line. Aoba, was it? More like Abe. The way the man pronounced it was like Oba. My apologies. It's understandable, Aoba said with a small smile and nod. Please keep a watch over Team Coffee. Goodwitch pointed at the older students and probably palmed her face when she saw Coco grin wildly. As Oba went over to stand by his designated team, Goodwitch looked at her scroll and scowled. If only she had a say in which team got a teacher, she would personally ensure Team Knox never did anything to break the rules. Unfortunately, this was a call Osman pulled his authority on again, and finally, Asuma. Yes! Sasuke, Naruto, and Kurama stood up with their fists in the air as they cheered. Asuma laughed and walked over to stand by them, the five males already chatting wildly while Goodwitch clutched her scroll tightly. This was not going to end in punishment. She was sure of it. Forgive me, Miss Goodwitch, but was there not a team of youths for me to preside over? Guy asked as he watched his teammates with a hint of jealousy. Goodwitch adjusted her glasses as a smirk crossed her face once again. At least one problem would be resolved from this decision. One problem she had thought to be impossible to fix. Elsewhere, one John Ark turned and sneezed into his arms before he looked back at the current page he was reading of X-Ray and Vav comic. So you're from Fog Academy, huh? Nice to meet you, Asuma said to Haku as his new team walked around the campus with him. The cigarette in his mouth was lit and hung from his lip as he talked. In case you hadn't already guessed, I'm familiar with these three troublemakers. Asuma, such slander to leave your lips. Naruto crossed his hands over his chest and pouted at the older man. How could you say such a thing to your favorite student? You were the old man's favorite, Naruto, not mine. Asuma chuckled as the blonde squawked in outrage. So, care to fill me in on why your permission to veil was revoked? That's our leader's fault, Kurama huffed. Oi, from what I hear, you're the one that told Coco Kurama, Naruto shot back with a glare. Kurama glared back at him from behind his shades, and the two pressed their heads together, glowing gold and red eyes locked. If you could have just kept your mouth shut, this wouldn't have happened. No, if you could have kept your virgin dick in your pants and gone to class like the rest of us, then it wouldn't have happened. This is your fault. My what? How is it my fault that Yang snuck into our room? You're the idiot that left the security locks down, idiot. Okay. Settle down, boys. Asuma cut in with a smile as he pushed the two hot-headed teens away from one another. He looked between them and laughed. Oh man, I'm glad to see you two haven't changed much since you left con. Karma huffed and looked away from the blonde with his arms crossed. I'm pretty sure one of us has changed. Oi, you want to go fuzzbutt? Naruto asked as he glared at the faunus. Naruto, let's not get ourselves in any more trouble than we already are, Haku said calmly while he gave Kurama a small dirty look. He agreed that both had good points on faults, but Kurama was the one that volunteered to lead Koko to the room while he and Sasuke were held in Yatsuhachi's massive arms by their necks. Asuma laughed and wiped a small tear from his eye. This is so nostalgic. I'm glad to see you found a new Sakura to keep yourself in check, Naruto. Kurama smirked and Naruto let out a small laugh while he rubbed his neck. Haku furrowed his brow in confusion when he saw Sasuke grimace and turned to their new watcher. I'm sorry, who? What, you don't know who Sakura is? Well, I guess the power couple really did cut all ties, Asuma said as he looked at Sasuke with a small smirk. Don't you dare. Sasuke glared at the older huntsman. Sakura is Sasuke's ex-girlfriend, Kurama said with a smirk. He ignored the burning glare that his partner gave him. They broke up at the end of the year when they had an argument over which school they should go to. She's the source of his librarian fetish. For the last goddamn time, I do not have a fetish. Sure, and Kurama doesn't want to chase a certain bunny, Naruto said with a nod. The whiskered teen grinned when the fondness and his partner glared at him. What? Not my fault you're both stuck on the sinking ship of denial? Screw you, Uzumaki, the two partners growled. Naruto was probably one of their first friends and, as they grew up, became akin to a sister to him. Asuma continued. He chuckled when Naruto wrapped his arms around himself and shuddered. Those punches, she's a monster, I swear, Naruto whimpered. Almost broke through my semblance. Was hers a strengthening one as well? Haku asked. No, that was righteous feminine fury, Sasuke said dryly, while Naruto let out a pitiful whimper. As fun as it is to go down this trip through memory road, I think we should have a small test to see if any of you have slacked off since you've been gone, Asuma said with a small smile as he took his cigarette from his mouth and dropped it to the ground, where he extinguished it with his foot. Team Nox lost all sense of humor as the four boys gained excited and determined looks on their faces. So, Miss Yuhi, how do Naruto, Kurama, and Sasuke know you? Ruby asked the red-eyed woman while they walked through the school grounds, dressed in their usual hunter gear. Kunai turned and smiled at the girl. I don't know them personally, but they and Asuma had a long history together due to their ties with his father. His father? Weiss asked curiously. Hiruzen Sarutobi. Kunai blinked in surprise when the girls winced or frowned at the name. So you really know how he died? The Fourth War killed him, Blake said, a frown on her face. He was a human that was a member of the White Fang before their methods changed. A speaker for Faunus rights that wasn't a Faunus. His loss was devastating to all who wanted equality for Faunus, and for the White Fang to ignore it, it was sickening. Kurenai nodded. It was a large blow to the village. To lose such an avid supporter of Faunus equality and an old member of the village's council, if he hadn't ensured Kakashi's campaign, I fear that most children would have gained some unsatisfactory traits, like Ruby fished, her teammates perking their ears up in interest. The three boys from the small city village of Kon always talked about their home, but they never really said anything. They would reminisce and they scrap adventures long past, but it was all so vague, and Haku was no better, but Team Ruby would take what they could get. Another time, the girls deflated and groaned lightly. They just couldn't catch a break. I'm more interested in getting to know the team I've been assigned. Kurenai smiled lightly as they stopped and sat at the small table. Her eyes drifted over to Weiss. Perhaps we should start with our resident celebrity. We have a celebrity? Where? Funny. Weiss glowered at Yang before she looked at her new watcher. What do you mean? Well, Kurenai leaned back and tapped her chin. I suppose I should go first in that case. The woman gently smiled at the girl. My name is Kurenai Yuhi. I've been a huntress for 8 years now. My goal, nearly complete since our transfer has gone through, is to teach at one of the 4 great hunter academies in Remnant and start a family with my partner. Partner? Yang asked. Asuma, Kurenai clarified with a smile as she lifted her left hand. A small red monkey was etched into her third finger, just above the knuckle. The girls raised their brows in confusion and Kurenai laughed lightly. It may be tradition to use a ring, but I didn't want to risk losing or having the engagement ring stolen while on a mission, so I got this tattoo to show that I was taken. It almost keeps our relationships hidden from any enemies, since it's also small and hard to find. That's so romantic. Blake flushed slightly when her teammates looked at her. What? It is? I think so too, especially since Asuma has to walk around with a white flower on his finger. Kurenai smiled lightly as she looked at the mark. She looked up at her new team and then looked at Weiss. Well, oh, right, Weiss looked at her, shook her head to rid herself of the jealousy she felt. I'm Weiss Schnee, heiress to the Schnee Dust Company, as you all know, but I don't want to just be known as a rich businesswoman. I want to do something meaningful with my life, save and protect people, so I decided to become a huntress. I want to be the best huntress I can, and hopefully one day put an end to the stupid rumors about my company, even if they turn out to be true. Yang and Blake smiled brightly at their teammate, while Ruby's lips trembled before she clung to the older girl. That's so beautiful, Weiss. Get off, Ruby. Weiss grunted and tried to push Ruby off, which elected laughter from the other three teammates. It was very heartwarming, Weiss, Kurenai said with a smile as Ruby released her teammate. She looked over to Blake. Now perhaps another infamous lady would like to speak. Blake started, and the girls all tensed as they looked at Kurenai. The other hunters arched their brow. Do you really think Ospin would keep us in the dark? Or that I wouldn't notice your bow twitch every now and then? Kurenai's smile widened slightly as the faunus flushed. I don't care. If you must know, I've had quite a few faunus friends in my time on this world, both those that had decided to leave the White Fang after it turned into what it is, and those that decided to stay. My name is Blake Belladonna, Blake said after a moment was taken to let all of Kurenai's words to sink in. Blake clenched her hands into fists lightly on the table. I used to be a member of the White Fang, had been since I was young, but after I realized that it wasn't what it used to be, that the new tactics worked for all the wrong reasons, I decided to leave. I wanted to get away from what I was a part of, what I've done, and decided to put my abilities to greater use. I want to find a way for faunus and humans to coexist in peace and protect the people I once sought to hurt. Admirable, Kurenai said with a smile. While the other girl's smiles grew with her, she leaned forward slightly. Now, this goes for all of you, so listen up. If any of you have any concerns or worries, don't be afraid to approach me. I'm here to help you more than I am to watch you. The girls nodded, and Ruby raised her hand. Can I go next? Ruby asked. Kurenai smiled and nodded, which made the young girl beam. I'm Ruby Rose, the team leader of Team Ruby. I love weapons and fighting grim, and I've been doing it for a long time with my Uncle Crow. My goal is to be the best team leader huntress I can and help the rest of my friends accomplish theirs, all while protecting Remnant. Ah, that's so sweet, sis, Yang teased with a smile. Ruby flushed when the rest of her team smiled at her the same way. Well, you guys are my friends, so why wouldn't I want to help you? She said. It's a very good goal, Ruby, and maybe as you get older, you'll find another more specific personal reason, Kurenai said as she put her hand on the young team leader's shoulders. She turned to the last team member and arched a brow. And now perhaps we shall hear from our resident troublemaker. Well, our most recent troublemaker, Weiss said as she smirked at her partner. Ruby pouted at her while the others laughed. Okay, where to start? Yang mused once the laughter had died down. I'm Yang Xiaolong, Ruby's older sister. I like to fight and beat up stuff. Yang out with my friends. There was a group groan from her teammates that Yang pointedly ignored as she spoke with the older huntress. And just have fun. I decided to become a huntress so I could travel the world and help people in the process. Aside from the fact that it runs in the family. I mean, my goal is to find someone so I can get some answers. The group waited for Yang to clarify, but she didn't continue. Yang just continued and glared at the table while her face clenched. Her eyes had flickered between lilac and red for a brief few moments before she exhaled. And I want to see where I can go with Whisker Boy. Yang smiled lightly. She looked at Blake. You know, thinking about it, that double date with you and Son sounds like a barrel of fun. Blake flushed bright red and glared at her partner while Weiss and Ruby laughed. Kurenai smiled, but she filed away Yang's anger at this mysterious someone as something to be a big concern about. Deciding to deal with it later, Kurenai's smile became a mischievous as she looked at Blake. Whose son? She asked. Blake flushed slightly while Yang grinned wildly. A hunky faunus Blake stole away for a day. That is not what happened. Blake growled. That's not what Naruto says, Yang sang. Ruby sniggered and whistled innocently when Blake glared at her. Weiss crossed her arms and scowled lightly. Sun Wukong is no good degenerates. That's an old friend of Uzumaki's. The two managed to drag Blake into a scheme that resulted in her being targeted by a high-ranking member of her old group. Wow, last time I look at you for any compliments, Ice Queen. The five females looked up to see a familiar blonde-haired monkey-tailed faunus lounging on a tree branch above their table. Sun grinned and gave a small wave at the group. Hi, girls. You wouldn't happen to know where Naruto is, do you? I checked his dorm, but there was a problem with it. It was sort of destroyed. Yang grinned up at him. We had a Yang in time. Oh, come on, Yang. That was terrible. It didn't even make sense. Ruby chided her sister. Yes, I called it. His son ignored Ruby's outburst and pumped his fist. He tapped his chin and then peeled the banana, his stinking food. Now, how to congratulate the little dude? Mr. Wukong, was it? Kurenai cut into the Faunus' plan as she inquired his name. You wouldn't happen to be acquainted with with a man named Roshi Wukong, would you? Sun blinked and swallowed the banana bite that was in his mouth before he flipped down from the tree branch and landed on the table. He pointed the remains of his banana at the woman with white eyes. You know Grandpa Roshi? Kurenai used a finger to push her son's hand down and gave him a flat look. You're related to him, all right. Roshi Wukong, known by such names as Master Wukong, Hermit Roshi, and recently using the alias Son Goku, is a notorious hunter. Kurenai scowled and glared daggers at Sun, and an absolutely shameless pig. Sun's smile vanished, and he relocated himself on the opposite side of the table, far from Kurenai's grasp, and cowered from her glare. Oh, that's why you know, Grandpa. We've run into each other more than once. Kurenai's grit out with her glare still locked on the Faunus. Is he bad? Ruby asked innocently. Kurenai looked at her calmly. He's a known associate and partner to the Toad Sage. Both men have been declared enemies to all females, human or Faunus. They peek on girls in baths, saunas, even perch themselves outside of windows at sometimes. Yep, that sounds like Grandpa. Sun muttered something Blake caught as she gave him a confused look. The Toad Sage? Ruby asked again. Kurenai frowned. The only known alias of the man that writes the smut known as the Ninjas of Love. Blake glared at Yang when she looked ready to speak up. I will cut you up into little pieces and scatter you across the globe. Party poo-poo. No cake for you. Yang huffed and pouted as she rested her head on the table in disappointment. She wanted to know what Kurenai would do to... Wait, all she has to do is not specify? Genius. Yang grinned and looked at her new mother hen. So, what if we know a girl who has a copy of this smut? Blake flushed bright red and glared daggers into the back of Yang's head. Give me her number. Sun said with a chuckle. She wilted under Kurenai's glare and slunk out of sight. Just kidding. Burn her book and give her something far more appropriate to read, Kurenai said simply once she had cowed the grandson of Roshi Wukong into silence. And if she insists on reading Ninjas of Love? Yang pressed on. She was aware of her partner's eyes turning to bore into the back of her skull, but she didn't care. This was way too funny. Well, we can't all be perfect, Kurenai said with a sigh. My opinion of her will be low, but if she so chooses to read it, I just hope this girl reads it somewhere far away from you. So long as she doesn't read smut in public, I can't really fault her. I got my own questionable readings at home. Just none of them were written by the Toad Sage. This man sounds like an enormous nuisance. Why is he not arrested? Weiss asked with a frown. He may write trash, but he's good at covering his tracks, Kurenai said with a frown. I only know about Roshi Wukong's involvement because he's so shameless about it. He practically he practically crows his perverse nature to the world. That's definitely Grandpa Roshi. Sun nodded in agreement. He cupped his chin and frowned. I wonder if that's why my mom didn't want me to go to a school near Bakuo. I knew you were a degenerate. This only proves it hereditary. Weiss scowled at the monkey-tailed Faunus. For your information, Ice Queen, I steal and stow away, not write dirty books. Sun argued back. Blake, I strongly suggest you dump him. Hey, Sun pouted. I can't dump him because we aren't even dating. Blake snapped. Yet, shut up, Yang. Well, Kurenai, how'd this all happen? Asuma asked in amusement to his slightly irate fiancé. He and Team Knox, the four boys scuffed up and cut lightly on their arms and legs, had come across a strange sight after their spar. Asuma, I will make you sleep outside, Kurenai warned while she watched her team argue. And by argue, she means watch Yang get choked by an infuriated Blake while Ruby cheered her sister on to fight back, and Weiss argued with Sun over his degenerate acts while the Faunus was encased in a block of ice from the neck down. Naruto snickered as he walked up to his pen pal. Geez, Son, if you wanted to chill, you didn't need to ask Sneeze to help you. Get my name right, Uzumaki. Weiss snapped with a glare. She pointed at Sun. This ruffian is a degenerate, no good, thief, and perverted spy. Sun was too busy snickering at the joke Naruto made to refute the accusation. And your point is, Sneeze? Naruto asked with a grin. I despise you, Weiss hissed. Naruto pouted and covered his chest. Your cruel and cold words dig a wound so very deep into my warm, noble heart. I mean, letting the snee heiress freeze some poor kid and watching as a one girl tried to choke another out. Asuma grinned at Kurenai. You're on thin ice, Sarutobi. Kurenai glared at him and then looked at his team. She took notice of their scuffed and disheveled forms as well as some light bruisings. What the heck happened to them? Asuma wanted to test us, Sasuke said with a small smile. He looked at his disappointed watcher. We should do that again. It was a very good learning experience, Haku said with a nod. Says you, Kurama said with a scowl. He cradled his tail to his chest appropriately. Protectively, a damn tree nearly crushed me and broke part of my tail. Sasuke rolled his eyes. You're such a damn queen. You're such a drama queen, Kurama. Says His Majesty. Screw you, Otsutsuki. Bite me, Uchiha. I'm sorry. Would both of you like some protection for tonight, or are you going bareback? Asuma asked with a challenging raise of his brow. Haku, Naruto, and Sun burst into laughter while the girls of Team Ruby stopped what they were doing to stare at the now red partners. Kurenai clapped a hand on her face before she smacked her fiance's arms. Ruby's only 15, Asuma. Watch your mouth. Kurenai glared at her amused partner with angry red eyes. Asuma held his hands up in surrender. Sorry, he said. To keep these rowdy boys in check, you really have to know what makes them shut up. Naruto, Haku, stop laughing or I'll trap you both in another sphere. Haku and Naruto's mouth snapped shut. Blonde boy in ice. I doubt you'd like to stay that way for the night, Asuma said to Sun, who had lost any sense of humor he had at the thought of being left outside in the cold. His name is Sun Wukong, Kurenai said with a small frown. Asuma arched her brow. What, like Roshi? He's my grandpa, Sun added. Aha, Asuma nodded. That would make sense. Naruto, break him out and behave yourself, or I'll limit you to one bowl of ramen tonight. The horror that crossed Naruto's face made Ruby burst into laughter. Ruby's face matched Naruto's when Kurenai spoke up. And Ruby, I'll be fixing that sweet tooth problem of yours. Serves you right, sis, Yang said with a little chuckle. She rubbed her neck and punched Blake in the shoulder lightly. Save rough play for the double date, Blake. Blake glared at her with red cheeks, but kept herself from lashing out while she rubbed her arm. Light or not, Yang's punches hurt. They watched as Naruto walked around and examined the cube of ice that contained his friend. Naruto hummed and pressed his flat palm against one side. The hand moved up, down, left, right, and then settled on a spot just above Sun's belt buckle. Don't move, or this could really hurt, Naruto warned his friend, and Sun became absolutely still. Naruto brought his hand back and clenched it into a fist before it swung forward and struck the ice. Naruto pulled his hand away from the ice and took a step back as the block fractured. The ice shattered into small portions, each no bigger than a thumb. Okay, that was hot, Yang mused with a grin as she leered at her boyfriend after he freed his friend with one blow. That was more skill than it was strength. Naruto grinned back at her. You ain't seen nothing yet, Yang. Down, boy, Asuma said to his assigned pupil. While the two teams began to talk civilly with one another, he looked to his teammate, partner, and fiancé with a raised brow. So what do you think Aerop is doing? Most likely finishing the repairs to the dorm, Kurenai said. She shifted uncomfortably. Have you seen Guy? Not since Goodwitch let us run off with our teams. Asuma reached into his pocket and pulled out a package of cigarettes before he put one in his mouth. Once it was lit, he took a small drag and then exhaled softly so that the smoke wouldn't rush out in a massive cloud. He looked up at the sky and hummed. We haven't heard any screams yet, so... Oh God, why? Yosh, I feel the springtime of youth, my noble student. Never mind. There it is. This is too good. PG got assigned to Guy? Oh, I've got to see this. Kurama burst into laughter. The Faunus pulled the camera from his pocket and rushed away, his partner not far behind him. Sasuke needed to see if Guy had changed since they left Vacuo, something he doubted, and he wanted to see if Guy's gym class uniform was still mandatory for training. Wait for me, Naruto cried out as he ran after his two friends, grabbing Yang's arms in the process. This is going to be priceless. Come on. Who's Guy? Sun asked, and Haku smiled lightly. A very eccentric man, from what I've seen. The feminine boy answered the fondness. Haku patted Sun on the shoulder. I think you'll enjoy it. Probably. Sun agreed with a grin as they followed after the rest of Team Nox and Team Ruby. A second after the teens had vanished, Asuma smirked and pulled his cigarette from his mouth. He turned to his partner in everything but name and arched a brow. So, what do you think so far? Aspen was right, Kurenai said with a small frown. She crossed her arms under her chest. Ruby is very childish. Blake is isolated and distant. Weiss is confident to the point of arrogance. And Yang is more affected by her mother's disappearance than we have had previously thought. That's what I figured. Asuma nodded. He let his arm slip around his fiance's shoulders and smiled at her when she looked up at him. Good thing they've got you to count on, Kurenai. There's no one I would rather trust with a fresh rookie team than you. Better than having them under your care, smokestack, Kurenai teased. Careful, those are fighting words. Asuma grinned back at her. They shared a quick kiss before Asuma separated from her and they followed after their teams. I was right. This is a gold mine. Kurama squealed as he began to take pictures of Team Juniper while they were all dressed in matching green spandex suits with red bands around their waist and orange leg warmers on. PJ is never gonna live this down. Huh. Right, PJ. Naruto mumbled as he stared at Nora and Pyrrha. He grunted when Yang elbowed him and gave her a small glare. What? Hormones? Jeez. Can't help myself. Besides, I see you staring at Ren. True, but I'm free to ogle what I want. You can't be trusted with wandering eyes. Yang countered with a smirk. That's so not fair. That's life for you in a nutshell, Whisker Boy. Not across his arms. Girls get all the luck. No, we get periods. It's life's way of maintaining balance. Yang smiled at him. True, but still, let's both agree to try not to ogle anyone else when we're doing something together. Agreed. Kurama stared at the two blondes in disbelief and looked at her fiancé. Were we ever like that? Us? No, no, not at all. I'm pretty sure you were always trying to kill me for looking at the other woman or for smoking a cigarette nearly 24/7, Asma said with a small smirk. Is it wrong that I'm jealous? No, they should be jealous. They'll probably never have make-up sex. True. Aha! Asma, Kurenai, you bring your youthful students to join mine? Guy beamed boisterously. If Oba was here, we could let them see a true team powered by the springtime of youth. Just heard your training session and came to investigate, Guy, Asma said. The new teacher shrugged and punched his student in the gut, causing him to crumble to the ground and wheeze. Work it, PJ! Work it! Kurama cackled as he continued to snap pictures like a professional. Give us a roar, PJ! Yeah! Kurama really likes taking pictures, Ruby said softly as she scooted closer to Weiss and away from the faunas. Weiss only stared and nodded. Both Sun and Blake had their eyes glued to the spar occurring in front of them, the former with a wide, excited grin, and the latter with narrowed eyes. Guys, help! Slightly scuffed up and bruised John decreed from the ground. He tried to army crawl towards his sideline teams. Tag me! Tag me! Ren looked at Pyrrha. Think he's had enough? I'm sure he could go one more round, Pyrrha said with a small smile. Pyrrha, why? John cried as a hand grabbed onto his ankle and dragged him away from the side. It's for your own good, John, Pyrrha and Ren drawled while Nora held up a sign. Go, John! Bust his kneecaps! Nora, John was cut off as a muscled arm wrapped around his neck. You know what? I think today is probably the best day of my life so far, Naruto said with a smile. Yang turned to her boyfriend and arched her brow. Really? Why's that? She asked while John screamed and cried in pain in front of them. Well, for one thing, I got to spar against one of my favorite teachers from Khan Academy again, Naruto said as he nodded back towards Asuma. Managed to witness first-hand destruction between two girls. Got to see two girls in skin-tight clothes. Ow. Just saying. Yang crossed her arms under her bust and frowned slightly after she had punched him in the shoulder. Is that all then? Naruto smirked at her and let an arm slip around her waist. No, best part about today, I got a total babe for a girlfriend. Yang grinned back and wrapped her arms loosely around his neck. Don't you forget it, Whisker Boy. They shared a kiss that would have deepened had their respective assigned teachers not pulled them apart. The two blondes grinned at one another as they were dragged to opposite sides of the sidelines. Kurama had a wide grin on his face as Guy called an end to the spar and Team Juniper gathered around their leader. He looked through his camera pictures and his eyes, concealed by his sunglasses, gleamed. Best day ever. End of chapter 10.